Hey Jeff, how you doing today?
Adam, how are you, my
I'm
man?
doing good. I'm doing good. Our goal with this show is to help. All right, so you asked me to write a little intro for how we do the show, and I'm trying
There you
to
go.
figure
There
out
you
the
go.
best way to get things going. So I was hoping
The
you could
most
juice me up a little
awkward,
bit, like
impossible way is the way to
conversation with
go.
me a little bit, because, the first thing for us to record is a 3 paragraph thing that I'm reading. It's a little daunting. So let's just
The
loosen it up a
only
little
way
bit.
forward is through.
You're such an asshole.
I know what you're thinking. Are the kinds of friends you wish you had. The kind of friends you wish you had. The kind of friends you wish you had. The kind of friends you wish you had.
Welcome to Friends You Wish You Had. Our goal for this show is to help GenXers survive in the AI era. So, what does that mean? Well, first off, it means showing you how to actually use this stuff to make your Gen X life better. Let's be honest, most of us don't really think about AI that much, or else we have this vague feeling of dread like we're building sandcastles on the beach while a massive tidal wave builds out there on the horizon and we have no idea. And we're definitely sick of everyone else blabbing constantly about the magic tricks they can do with AI or how it's going to take our job and move into our house and sleep with our wives. That's who we're making this pod for. The Gen Xers who are AI novices, or let's just say AI skeptics. Because honestly, there's a lot you could do with this stuff, a lot of little things you could do just to make your life better. I love to tell my daughter about how I actually used to go to the library to study and it was some kind of panacea, but seriously, that shit sucked. Researching something on the web is way easier and way better. And that's true about AI too. The tech bros are annoying, the creepy feeling is real, but there's a lot you can do just to make your life better, to make your work better, your relationships better and more manageable, your boomer parents or your Gen Z or Gen Alpha kids. We also want to talk about how to think about AI because, like, we've been through one of these before. We've been through a massive technological revolution. The dot-com boom changed everything, the way we work, the way we date, the way we watch porn, our movies, our books, our pop culture. It fucked up the economy twice, and we're still here, okay? We've been through it before. We're still working. We're still in the workforce just like we were back then. So, how should we be thinking about this stuff? So, how should we be thinking about this stuff? Is it sadness or euphoria? 2001, Terminator, The Matrix, none of this shit ended that well, okay? So, how the fuck are we supposed to think about this stuff? And that's the idea of the show.
Powerful stuff.
Oh, I know. I appreciate that, Jeff.
It's like the beginning of The Insider. It's like, got to get fired up. It's like, you ready to go now?
Yeah, I'm fucking ready to go now. It's true. I am. I was already nervous. Now I'm mad. So, that's probably better.
I think the intro says it all. I mean, I think some of the dynamic a little bit is just that you're more optimistic and I'm more
I think
skeptical. So
that's
hopefully
reality.
somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the middle
Yeah.
is, and I'm skeptical. I'm not so skeptical that I can't have some optimism there, and I certainly know you're also very skeptical despite your
Right. I
optimism.
like lead with
So,
the optimism, but the skepticism is there. At least I'm aware of it. Yes, totally.
you
But
know,
that's also how
it's
we.
like come big with the optimism and then follow up with the skepticism,
Yeah,
I
right.
feel like is the way you do business. So I like that.
It's
I like
totally
that.
true. It's totally true. And that served us very well in the work world. It's like I'm like we could do this, we could do that. And you're like, well, are we going to pay for that? How are we going to do that exactly? So the dynamic works.
But I would say in our business, AI is playing a bigger and bigger role. We do production, we do marketing, we do all kinds of content creation for clients. Certainly, I am much more of a novice than you are. I'm like, let me see if this sticks around for a few months. You'll tell me if it has or it hasn't. And generally, my AI chops have been growing in the last 4, 5, 6 months, whereas yours are like entering a level of sort of um, I don't know, maybe mastery. You would tell me if it's mastery or
The
not, but
level where you can sell it. That's the way that I
expertise.
look at it. Like if you could sell it rather than buy it, that's the level. That's the bridge I'm trying to
No,
get over.
absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
that's the
absolutely.
level. Like
And
mastery,
so,
eh. Are you ever you're always a master, always a
well,
student.
I mean, I think
So
there's two, there's sort of like the mastery of the person who can, get under the hood and physically build the engine. And then there's the mastery of someone who's like, we need this kind of engine in this car or
right,
in this system. So,
right.
that's what I think of when I think of working with you on a lot of the projects we do. But I think for me, like, I'm a novice and I am skeptical, and I always come at it at a place of like, at what point do I really need to know how to do this? At what point is the way I've been doing it not working for me, or too time consuming, or too annoying, or whatever? Yeah, going to the library to do research for a research paper in high school sucked, but that's because high school sucked and doing research papers sucked.
Yeah.
But I really do enjoy libraries, and I certainly don't go to them as much anymore. And they sold me a false bill of goods that the whole library can be on my phone. And yeah, I'm a Gen Xer, so I was certainly sucked into that dynamic, as we all were. But at the same time, I don't know if if I would look back and say, oh, that shit sucked. But I think that is that's the tension of it all. And I am looking to take some of the stuff we talk about on the show on a weekly basis and sort of apply it as like a weekly AI lesson. And that sounds really formal. I don't think I mean it that formal, but like, what can I do
Like
this
put it
week
to use.
put it to use?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In a way where I'm trying to inspire my curiosity. There's not a specific work project that I have to go out and figure this out for, so I think that's like, I would put that to you a little bit and say, what's the thing I can do? Because I don't think this is meant to just be for novices only. And I don't think I'm a total novice, but I'm more on the novice side than the expert side. That's for sure.
That's why I said skeptic. I think it is that optimist versus skeptic thing. Like, I think you said it right about inspiring your curiosity. It's like when I hear about one of these things, it inspires my curiosity. I'm like, oh, I want to go do it and figure it out. Like 5 years ago or 4 years ago, when it comes to AI, it's like, look at this crazy thing you could do. Well, I got to figure out how to do that, And so that's the inspire. But I feel like you hear that stuff and you have one of two responses, at least in our generation. You have one of two responses. Number one, you're like, oh, I want to try to do that, like me. Or there's I don't know, there's a feeling of resistance, that's that vague feeling. Like I don't know. And that is like, that's you. I feel like it's not that you're a novice, it's that you're a skeptic naturally. And it's like, I think that the people we're trying to talk to are those folks,
Totally. And I do think there's a Zen thing to it a little bit too, the longer we live and the more experiences we have, the more we realize that it's, as corny as this shit sounds, it's more about the journey than the destination.
Yeah.
And I think in our work and creative life, I'm much more focused on the destination and the outcome. The process is whatever process you need to use. And if the process worked once to get you to this good outcome or this good destination, why do we need to screw with the process? Like, that is the least interesting thing to me. And I would say that's just things in life, not just when it comes to, work or, work related projects. And I think the older I get, the more I'm seeing that like the journey, of how to get there can be sort of the point of it all as opposed to the destination. And I think you've always been, and we've been friends and partners for 25 years doing all kinds of different, creative projects. And we've been very lucky to do that. But I think from the first days when we started working together, you were always so interested in the process and improvements in the process. And, I don't think that that's a Gen X trait or a Gen Alpha trait or a baby boomer trait. I think that's just a human trait that some people have more of than others. And like I said, it goes back to this, early tension of, mankind and psychology about, sort of savoring the journey rather than the destination.
I think that's really interesting insight. I didn't think about it that way. And if I look at my life outside of what we do, it's totally focused on that. Like I coach Odyssey of the Mind, and I run that program for my daughter's school, my Gen Alpha daughter's school. And that's all about the process. It's about the journey, the Odyssey. I'm like super into the creative process. I do Qigong and think about that process. And then when we look at our work, like our value proposition is we have a process that nobody else can do. A lot of people can do video, but we can create a process that it's very like what we market as a process. So I never really thought about it that way, but I really think that connects with where I'm at. And I get what you're saying about you too. You're embracing it though, in your in your older years, you're
in my,
embracing it.
yeah, I would say in my Gen X way, but in my sort of like, emotionally crippled,
Exactly. That is the
fearful
Gen X way.
way where like the first thing that comes to, when I think about this, and whether it was like, going back 25 years when I learned how to use a flatbed editor.
Yes.
And that was so fucking hard and matching those frames, but I figured it out. And then it was like 2 semesters later, it was like move to the digital editor, like move to the Avid. And I'm like, fuck that. And I still have really never learned, like
I still remember trying to
you
convince
could
you
do it.
to.
And then we would hire editors and I could like do just enough, I could log some footage or I could throw shit on a timeline. But when it really came to how well I could, stylistically edit, I still mastered the flatbed more than I have digital editing, which is fucking absurd in 2025.
Because you can put your hands on it. It's tactical. But
no, totally.
I've always thought of it
so
like
the tension.
Yeah, good.
I was just gonna say that the first thing, and I don't feel like I'm alone in this when I talk to people when when they talk about their experiences using AI. It's like I am very sympathetic because I have it, that initial wave of like tension and frustration and insecurity that's like, oh, we have to learn a new way now, and it's like, well, where do you start? And it seems so overwhelming, and especially in our industry where so much of it is focused on working with our clients to innovate. It's just, I'm just like, oh my God, like, where do you even start with this? Like, why do we have to be doing this?
Yeah, totally. And I feel like, I remember being in college and trying to convince you to deposit a check in an ATM. And it was like, you were like, no way. I feel like that's just a natural, like you like to ease into it. And when we set up ChatGPT for the first time for our company, you're like, do we really want to connect this to our Google? Like you're thinking about those kind of things. I always feel like you're the envelope and I'm what's inside of it. Like you come with the vision and like you have better creative vision than I do. You do that better. And then you come with the reality at the end. And I'm like all the execution in between. That's kind of the way that I think about it.
And I think that's true. But I also think, maybe to backtrack on what I said a little bit, I do think one thing we talk about sort of like the process and, oh, do we need a new process? Is I enjoy the process. You know what I mean? Like when we lived in Colorado and we were growing weed, the people who taught us how to do it, like were real old school about it and they grew great weed and it was a lot of fun. And I'm like, it was like the practice, and that practice worked for me. And it wasn't like something we were doing to earn money or anything like that. It was just something out of like curiosity and enjoyment and, the miracle, it was actually legal. So it's like, this is awesome, but for me, it was like the weed we grew was like unbelievable. And like, we had this process and I'm like, it works. Like there's not, and I'm enjoying doing it. So it's, I think there is some of that too, where it's like, if you enjoy the process, it doesn't necessarily need a new process. But at the same time, like, again, that's the difference between like a personal hobby and, sort of the changing times and changing work environment and people like, what we do, the work we do is the technology is so integrated into it that of course you've got to adapt and sort of learn new skills.
Yeah. And that practice, it's a big Taoist thing. So Zhuangzi, one of the Taoist texts, talks about a butcher and like how a butcher has been cutting meat his whole life to the extent that he could just walk up to, I think it was a pig, and he could cut in exactly the right place without even thinking about it every time and just cut through it like it was butter, through the bones at exactly the right moment and everything else like that. And that like being, close to being, one with the Tao or whatever, like that's approaching that level. And I think that's true of I think that's true of really any practice, So as I knock over my drink and pour lemon water all over my table.
Definitely. Well, I think the thing that, wanted to talk about sort of week to week on this show, sort of like practical stuff that people that sort of, I hate to say this, Gen Xers like ourselves can do to sort of kind of learn AI, whether they're like a novice or sort of stuff you can do if you already have sort of dove into the pool and are, working with more sophisticated stuff, what you can do to like learn and innovate at that level too.
I would
But,
say
you know,
how to get started and how to level up. And level up can be little levels or big levels depending on where you are. But all these things are like how to get started and how to level up.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the biggest use of that I've started doing with Chat GPT is it's like I kind of, I walk in the mornings, whatever, exercise, clear my mind, like whatever. And I've started going to ChatGPT just on my phone and just started to sort of like kind of talk into it, pose a problem, lay out a set of ideas, and it's just recording me, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, wherever my thought is. And then I'm sort of like just like barfing out all this like creative anxiety, whatever the fuck it is, and like asking it to do something with it, either to just summarize it for me or answer this question or give me an idea. And it's more about the barfing out the sort of the shit on my mind rather than the what do I want it to do. And it's been incredibly interesting and effective, I think, to some extent, to kind of set up my day or to help me with a project that I'm working on, or to even as sort of like a little therapeutic in a way of like just to kind of see my thoughts come back to me with some kind of filter and to like look it over. And that's sort of this, and I again, I don't know if it's a method, but it's sort of like this practice I've started to adopt. And it's like super simple. And it's the difference between sort of, to me, I probably won't even say this very well. It's sort of like using the technology to sort of help me get a handle on what I'm trying to do versus like, here's this specific task, like write me 10 emails or something, sort of very, like deliver on this job that needs to be done.
Right. You're trying to connect it to behavior or like your real world rather than a task, because it always, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like anytime you say, just have it do a task for you, like there's like a block, like what kind of task would I do? And when is this the right task or is that the right? And like, you never really do it in that situation. It's like, it's breaking through in something you're already doing and like having it enhance something you're already doing rather than like finding a task and evaluating how it does. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's some of that. I also think it's some of, this skill with all of this, as I've learned, is just how to prompt the LLM. Mm-hmm. And as someone who's sort of, what's the word, as someone who's a bit of an existentialist, it's like you can write a prompt that says, write me an email about, getting this, write me an email to send this invoice to my client. And it can literally be a 15-word sentence, or that could be, a 30 paragraph.
On mine, prompt, it's a 30 paragraph thing.
Yeah, it's totally. Like James Joyce, so
I've got like 7 documents.
Immediately, when I write prompts to do tasks, I'm immediately like, well, wait a minute, what about
what
this?
Am I missing?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I think one of the constructive things of doing this in every day is sort of like, it's helping me to think about prompting, you know what I mean, in a way that's not like, like a checklist, and checklists are very helpful. I use them all the time, but just sort of an organic way to kind of learn how to sort of give the LLM information, which it needs to do a task, and to like prompt it, you know what I mean? How best to prompt it.
So
if that makes sense.
It does. So I'm going to ask you kind of a weird question because of just what I'm thinking right now, which is, how do you use Gmail? So when you get a bunch of mail in your Gmail, what do you do with it?
How do I use Gmail? I feel like I use so much Gmail, I couldn't tell you how I use it.
Well, I like, what do you do with your inbox is the way to say it. It doesn't even matter that it's Gmail. I just know you use Gmail. So that's why I asked you that way. But
no,
like,
I mean,
like, how do you manage your inbox?
Through...
Like, do you put things into folders? Do you delete things after they're done? Do you move them around?
I mean, I think I would say I have everything that's not going to spam goes to one place.
Okay.
And then I separate it out from there.
You separate it out from there. That's the part that I'm trying to get to. I feel like a lot of the disquiet about this. So the way that I use my email is I never separate anything. If you look at my phone right now, I have like 300,000 unread messages. I just don't separate anything. If I need to use it, I use it, and I trust search to do all my work. So I never organize anything, and I trust Gmail's search engine to just be in the flow of my day and be able to pull up anything I need ever. And maybe twice since I've been doing this for like 10 years have I not been able to find something, but it's an insignificant amount. And I feel like part of the challenge with this stuff, part of that, oh, am I prompting right? I don't know where to go and everything is, and really part of that disquieting feeling I was talking about that I feel like is part of this, is that you're like, you don't have training wheels. Like you don't have those things that we got accustomed to make us feel like we're productive. The way that you interact with this stuff is more like you're interacting with a human and less like you're interacting with a software product that has a very fixed way for you to do each thing. So you can't exactly learn how to do X. You can only learn how to talk to it about doing X. And it's more like, you're managing an employee that is fundamentally not human. So keeping both those things in your head at the same time is a challenge, and it feels uncomfortable. Even the way that ChatGPT's interface is set up, it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like you can see all your stuff at one place or know exactly where things are. And I think that presents that get started challenge,
Well, even the way, just everything's just a longer and longer conversation on the same task or challenge or whatever you're trying to do. It's, it feels very much like Web 1.0. Or like my notebooks. I got my notebooks, and you're.
I love notebooks. Yes.
Yeah, it's very, it could use some, it could use some Gmail-ness to it, for sure.
But I think that's intentional. Yes, it could use some Gmail to it, but it's more like you need to move your way of thinking towards it to really fully use it. And that's a challenge. Like, I think there could be steps there, and there will be. There are going to be more applications that make it feel more like that. And I think the strongest, like long-term, like short, long-term, like the most substantial impact is going to start with AI in apps that you already use, which is already happening, but that's going to become the main way people interact with that stuff. This stuff, I think, in the sort of medium short term. But I think, and so it's not like you have to do this or you'll never be able to use it. But if you really want to understand it and understand how it can fit into your life, like embracing that flow a little more is part of the challenge. And that's the daily practice to get there too. So.
Well, and again, it's sort of just, starting out by fucking around with it, I think.
Yeah.
You can't break it. It's not going to, you're not having it do anything. You're not like email my boss and
right. It's not connected to anything. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's not connected to anything, and it's sort of, and the results are, they're generally quite impressive. I don't think anyone, and I don't think it's so difficult to sort of, the results are quite impressive, and you see sort of that exponential growth in what it can do by fucking around with it, So, and I think that's a very common experience, and it's, there's this like coffee cigar shop in Ybor City in Tampa where we were at the other day, and the guy who owns the place just randomly started talking about how he's using ChatGPT to like organize his family has some big reunion, like sports extravaganza, like all the different leagues and events and, all this stuff. And it was just like, just this kind of random thing. And I think it's people who are already starting to use the technology. Like, I think it's much more, we're treating it like, oh, there's all these novices out there, but who the novices are and who the experts are, and then just sort of the people that are just already using it. And we're all sort of using it with search now already, even if we don't realize it. It's quite extensive, now the business case, and I think that's a whole other story.
Well, I like the way
profitability, and that's like just a different discussion, but the sort of civilian use of this sort of like search plus do everything tool that you can just start working with. I'd be curious to know what the extent of that.
I think The question is like, how do you get started? I think like, let's just take that because we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff on this show, but let's just start with that. How do you get started? And I think the most important thing you could do is sign up for ChatGPT. So if you're not started at all, the first thing you should do is get an account with ChatGPT. And that is free. It doesn't cost any money. And so you should have already done it. And most people talking probably have already done it. But in case you haven't, do it. And get that account and then download the app, because there's a difference in the experience on your phone and on the laptop. And you should try both experiences to start to get at some of the stuff we're talking about with my Gmail comparison. You're going to see that stuff. Like, it might be easier for you to work with it on your phone because there are more things like that on your phone. Like when you browse Facebook, you don't get to see everybody's updates. You just see what comes across your desk. You're not seeing everything that you have organized in a way. Same with like Insta or TikTok or anything like that, you know? So I feel like it's good. That might be a more comfortable experience, but as you get more advanced and comfortable with it, you're going to want to use the desktop version to do more productivity oriented things and stuff like that. So get an account and do both. And what I would say is your use case is a super awesome way to start, because it starts to, first of all, like, we need people to talk to. Like, being able to just brain dump is a healthy, and you're using two core features of AI when you do that. Number one, you're using the transcription, which is such a game changer about this. Transcription is a huge thing. So it's transcribing what you do. And like when I go for a walk, I'll make a note to myself. I'll use Apple Notes and I'll just turn on transcription. It's also using AI to transcribe me. It's in the background, but that is a core function that you're using on ChatGPT. And then you're asking it to do something with the information. And that is a separate thing that AI can do and is really powerful for, which is organizing the input you give it. So you might ask, what do you ask it to do? Like summarize it, or it depends on what you're talking about? What do you usually do?
Yeah, just, just some kind of, just present it back to me in a more organized fashion,
Right.
in one form or another, and, sometimes I'll be like, tell me what you think too, but that's really just what I'm looking for. And it's sort of just, it's like this luxury of having like a writer's assistant. We come from the world of content creation and film production, and it's like, it's one thing to be like a producer or a writer, and which we have been or whatever, but we were never at that level where we could have an assistant like that. Yeah. And it's just this incredible thing. So it's, while the feedback isn't always amazing, just the simple sort of like summary back to you of what you've said, or it's super impressive, and it's a super basic function of ChatGPT. It's by no means the most advanced thing it can do, but and then just again, the difference between, like you said, dictating into it, again, it's just like this incredible luxury. Like, I'm just going to sit here and talk to this assistant, and they're going to write everything down and summarize it and turn it into a list or remind me about this. And it, it's just doing it. It's like this incredible tool that you can mess around with. And like, it's something you talk a lot about. It's the arbitrage opportunity right now, is you can do it for free.
Yeah.
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 Like, it's only
VCs
costing the planet CO2, but you can do it for free.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I hear a lot of people.
That probably won't be forever.
I think that's a great point. I actually hear that you made that joke about CO2. I think I hear a lot of people in our generation, like, that's where they go first. Oh, I don't want to use ChatGPT because, of the environmental impact, or the other thing I hear, like, I do something where sometimes I'll pit the models against each other. So I'll give a task to Claude, say, and then when it comes out with its output, I send its output to ChatGPT, and I say, well, they did a better job than you can. What can you just kind of create some competition? It actually works. It's been studied. It's not just something that I do that's a wild hair. But I have people say, well, then you're just wasting so much energy. But I feel like people have this idea that you send a prompt and you're like burning a tree, like you knock down a tree with that prompt. And that's not the reality of the situation. It's the same way we have to look at environmental issues, like about everything else, driving a car, or there are personal choices you can make, but that's not really the personal choice that you can make. That's not really a logical way to think about it. And on the other hand, we should have regulation of that stuff because it really matters. And that is what our government's for. And that is like a systemic thing as opposed to how it connects to your life. So that's my opinion on that.
I feel like you're jumping ahead to the third topic of the show.
Oh, no. I got
Dystopia,
lots
Utopia,
more to go on that. But getting back to what you do. So what you do is that, and what I would recommend is do something like that. Do something that just fits into your everyday life first. So say you don't go for a walk every day because you're not like an Adonis the way that Jeff is. Then do it on your car ride to work. I used to do that actually. Every day I commute to the office, and instead of listening to a podcast, I decided to start just talking and dumping it out. So yeah, exactly. I think that not to step on the second topic we're going to talk about today, but I think like one of the ways that this can improve our society has to do with loneliness too. So I think having that experience of talking ad nauseum to someone, like I have insecurities actually about that. Like if I'm just blabbing on endlessly to somebody else, like I find myself end up just like looking at their response more and more, and like, are they bored? Am I talking too long? Like those things invade my ability to just blah. And
well, I think that's part of getting, the older you get, the more sort of comfortable you are with yourself in a way, and the more mature you are, the more you realize it's like when you were younger, you're like, I'm going to talk to my friends about all my problems and I want to ask them what they think. And you get older, you have kids, and I just think in general, people are less inclined to do that. Some of it is because I think, you have less anxiety. I just think as you get older, you have less anxiety for most people. And the other part of it is like, I do think it's sort of this block that gets created. You're just supposed to be more mature. You can sort of see that look in your friends or your, whoever's face of just like, man, I can't solve this problem for you. What's the point of even doing it? And then it is this sort of outlet, like when you get older, you don't like burden your friends with all your bullshit. You go to a therapist kind of thing. And this is sort of, I would still recommend everyone go to therapy if they can, but this sort of splits the difference a little bit. There's a freedom in kind of saying it out loud and then just having something there to sort of digest it that I think can give you, again, different than just dictating it. It can give you a little bit of feedback. It can summarize it a little bit and kind of show it to you, and you're just surprised at the results. So I think that's a very useful part of it for people that want to kind of take advantage.
So what I would say is 3 things. Download and get an account. That's the first thing. Second thing is and ChatGPT's voice function is called Whisper. It only works on the app. So you need to get the app as well as on desktop to try that function. And so, then you're going to get, because I did this, I know you're going to do it. You're going to get on ChatGPT and you're like, where is the Whisper? It's what it's called, but it's not advertised that way on the thing. It's just basically speak to it. And the thing that I think is the biggest hack for people our age when they're dealing with this stuff, and I try to push you on this all the time, and this is the other thing I would recommend. If you're feeling even the slightest hesitation about not knowing where something is or what to do, ask it. Just ask ChatGPT. So like when I looked for that whisper button, the first time I was like, there's no whisper button. I said, hey, ChatGPT, I typed it in, how do you use Whisper? And it just told me. Or if you're like, I can't find the button to do this, like they're really good at that. They can do it for their own interface, but they also can do it for, like I was using ClickFunnels and I was like, I don't know where this feature is. I just asked ChatGPT, like, where is the button? I don't see it anywhere. I'll even be annoying the way that your dad and mom are when they're trying to use a phone and they're like, I can't figure out the password. And it's like, you get so annoyed. Well, you can be the one. AI is never going to get annoyed. So just treat AI the way your parents treat you when they're trying to do technology. And it's like a huge unlock for you, I think.
Well, that or for, whatever the quote unquote business people out there, I just say, don't take no for an answer.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Seriously. I mean, it took me a while to figure that out. And it was something you're just like, just tell it what it gave you and say it's wrong. And lo and behold, it like came up with some more information for me,
Yeah.
and that never would have occurred to me on my own. Like,
Totally.
I
It's
think,
counterintuitive.
so
Yeah.
I definitely think it's like, don't take no for an
I like
answer.
that. I like that. And
And as we've talked about before, like it can do a lot, but it's very imperfect. It's very prone to mistake. I don't want to say very prone to mistakes, but it's prone to mistakes. And like you should be fact checking it. It's not. It's like whatever you do, you're the experienced, say, producer, and this thing is like the new assistant. Like it's eager, it's got a lot of energy, but it's going to do too much. It's going to fuck shit up, and you're there to sort of be the senior person in charge. It's not there to just like, if you're just there to have it just do it and I don't need to check it and it'll figure it out, you might have some early success, but I think it's going to bite you in the ass because that's not really what it's good at.
totally true. Totally true. And then the last thing, so that's two things. And the last thing I would say to do is find one problem for it to solve for you. So I'm going to give a couple examples from my own life. I'm going to ask you if you've ever done something like this, but you already gave us an example like this. Like that guy who he was already going to this reunion, and it was like 40, 50 people, and they wanted to do this thing. So he was like, hey, maybe I'll put this into ChatGPT, and it set up a whole agenda for them. So that's like solving a problem. For me, like I want to say 2 years ago, my daughter wasn't really understanding freestyle. She's in swim team, but she couldn't like maximize her speed in freestyle. So I asked it to come up with some exercises to help her to learn her form better in freestyle. And it gave a whole routine, like a day by day routine to improve that. That's like solving a problem in your life. So I would say, and your life is different than ours. It could be, wide open what that problem to solve is. And it can be a little problem. My wife used it like, oh, she had some shrimp and she couldn't think of a good recipe. So she asked it that's solving a problem in your life. So just find one problem to solve and see what it triggers in your mind about what you can do with it. That would be my third piece of advice. So Jeff, while I was in New York for our company, you sent me a voice message that you got from your mom. And I thought that might be something that we could talk about on the show.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think first let's play the voice message.
All right,
for
let's
sure.
do it. Let's do it.
Jeff, call me when you get a chance. I had the most amazing experience with Chat GPT. It was like I have a new friend who understands everything. You gotta call me. I gotta talk to somebody about this. All right, bye. I'm off to a store.
So yeah, that was just totally out of the blue. It totally made me smile. I have a bit of a tense relationship with my mom. She's 80. She's doing pretty good, but it's stressful. She has some pretty severe, I don't want to put my mom's business in the streets, but some pretty severe sort of like ADD or ADHD. It's, I don't know. I think a lot of us in our 40s and 50s are challenged by, our boomer parents or, kids in general, adult kids are challenged by their adult parents.
I like your mom
But,
a lot. I love your mom, but I would say she's a piece of work is the way that I would describe it. She's and
an
always has
intense,
been. It's not like
piece of work.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, here she was like just discuss, and she's a bit of a, I don't know, one word you could use for my mom is a bit of a shut-in, doesn't go out much, is kind of a night owl, and she has, found a friend in AI.
She sure has.
And just her enthusiasm in that voicemail.
Yeah,
is really
the optimism beaming in her voice. I'll tell you what it made me think first. It made me think of way back when this stuff first came out. The first thing I thought of, my cousin in Seattle was at that time working at like volunteering in elder care facilities, helping with legal advocacy for elders. And so she had a lot of close people to her that were old and in that state where they were kind of alone. A lot of them didn't have friends. They were the last ones of their group who were still alive because they were older than your mom, you know. And and that was when I was first learning about AI. And what I felt like, this is like such a revolution for these people. The idea that this thing could listen to see if they fell, or that they could talk to it when they're lonely. Like, it's like a game changer, a huge game changer for seniors, for the older community, and particularly for seniors who haven't grown up with it. And this is like pure magic for them. Like, what, so when I heard your mom's voicemail, that's the first thing that came to my mind. What was the first thing that came to your mind?
No, I mean, like I said, I laughed. I sent it to you.
Yeah.
I just feel again, how ubiquitous this technology is coming or becoming. And my mom, she's on the computer a lot, but certainly not a, very,
Luddite, right. She's not a Luddite.
yeah, not a very technical person, and, needs, a lot of help from her kids to do stuff. But, she was able to figure this out, and it made me smile. And it's one of those things we certainly talk about, the loneliness epidemic and that sort of issue of isolation in our society and how technology has contributed to that. And short of, some kind of cataclysmic event that wipes out all the technology, I don't really know what the fix to that is. And this is the first thing that's come along that feels like it could be, and it is another piece of technology that could be helpful and it could fulfill the role that you're describing. And I think it's something that it would be good for my mom. I've tried to talk to her a little about it, and it's, we haven't really gotten too much into it other than like, oh yeah, I could talk to you. And my mom's always looking for like a guru therapist, shoulder to cry on, she talks and, and again, putting my mom's business in the streets, but
Well, it's a way
just
cheaper life coach. Like, I know so many
yeah,
of our friends' parents who at one time in the last 30, 40 years, 30 years, have fallen into either a life coach that's really a cult sort of world, or like some kind of system. Anytime there's a system, there's going to be a lot of money changing hands and probably some hearts broken, I feel like, in the long term. And I feel like this is a lot cheaper and a lot sort of less predatory than that, I guess.
yeah. I mean,
I
all
guess
those concerns,
important.
when ChatGPT can say, I'd like to buy you a gift. Let me access your retirement account. Certainly that makes me nervous, but my mom she's been scammed before. You know what I mean? Like, scams are not new. And I think a lot of the fear we have with this is the same fear we have with other things, which is people take advantage of people. And, there's ways to use AI to take advantage of people. And, I don't think that's going away whether we had AI or not, but it definitely made me feel like, again, there's trying to do so many things to like get my mom out of her bubble a little bit and be out and engage more with the world. And, been trying for a while now. She's 80 years old. It's not really working. So if this is something that can like fill that time in a positive way, and I think it's great. It's exciting. And it does feel like in this, as we look into the future and need more caregiving and, are worried about people being lonely, and we see that the health effects that loneliness has on people, it's very interesting.
Well, I think also part of the loneliness argument that we don't really talk about that much when it comes to older people is hearing loss. I feel like there's a real, like, when you see people recede from society, particularly if they were more social before. Some people are introverted their whole lives, but when you see people start to recede, it's like, think about when you're talking to someone and you can't understand what they're saying and you have to keep asking them, what did you say? And how you start to feel embarrassed or annoyed, they get annoyed or whatever it is. I feel like that's like every minute for a lot of people who've lost their hearing. And then for people, getting a hearing aid is like something that they have a very complicated relationship with. So like we have a business partner, Joe, who's like 85, and I feel like I've seen him recede from society, and I really think it's because his hearing is so poor. In fact, the fact that like TikTok and Facebook and things like this have a video that will just keep playing over and over and over again until you move on to the next one is like another thing that's helping for technology with older folks, just so they can hear the thing again. And the thing about ChatGPT is you can turn up the volume yourself. It never gets tired of you asking what or asking, for more. And it sort of is a release valve for that. So I think that's an aspect of it that's unique to adults, or to older adults. But I also feel like, and I'm curious what you think about this, I feel like when it comes to personal well-being stuff, like we've been just talking about, older people and younger people, like our kids and our parents, are the two groups that both have the most to gain from this in the short term that way, and the most threat of being scammed, manipulated, messed up by it. And so I'm fascinated by that dynamic, and I'm nervous about that dynamic all the time.
Well, I think one thing that Gen X people, our generation, the Gen X generation, is so familiar with, it's just part of our DNA, is like the media created fear.
Yeah, totally. Do you know where your
Going
children
back to
are?
like, do you know where your children are, and the war on drugs, and like the PMRC, Tipper Gore's, like the music is getting our kids because she bought a Prince album, and now we're having, congressional hearings and, labeling music. And
If you
I
play
mean,
it
it is just
backwards,
so,
yeah, all that
yeah. I
stuff.
mean, it wasn't like we were the originators of that. Like that started before us. But with us, like, with sort of media really becoming mass media in the 70s and 80s, and that, eyeballs and just, needing to keep people's attention dominated all the time, the sort of fear-based story in media to like get people hooked or to get people worried about shit, it wasn't really that big of a problem. It just, we know it. We know it when we see it. This is your brain on drugs. Like it was just, it either scared the shit out of people or it was the most preposterous thing ever, but you couldn't escape it. And, so we see that and understand that very well. That doesn't mean that we don't, when it's something new like this, that you just can't fall back into that pattern of being irrationally afraid of it. And certainly like the media doesn't help the way we, obviously if it was mass media in the 80s, I don't even know what you want to call it right now, but the attention to, own your, or the opportunity to like own people's attention span, on their device from the moment they open their eyes to the moment they close their eyes, is more intense than it's ever been. It's affecting different, different generations in different ways, but we're all there. And, I think the media has a new story that it can tell, which is like the dangers of AI. Like, we're doing a podcast about AI. It's like all over the narrative. It sort of deserves to be in a way that it is this, transformative technology, maybe for good, maybe for bad. We'll find out. It is sort of that important. The dangers are really there, but the sort of irrational fear that can be created, okay, and the content that goes with it is just, it's just incredible. It doesn't matter where you are, you can't escape it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. But I also feel like that's right, but at the same time, this shit can be really dangerous. I feel like that's the other thing about this in a way that maybe other stuff couldn't, because it's got a human aspect of it. And that human aspect is sycophantic. Like, I don't think there is a world where bad actors can train AIs to do things that are highly manipulative of people to negative ends. Now, there is nothing that the AI can do that a human can't and hasn't already done to your parents. Like, I think that's the part that's the media hype that there's like something special about this, that it can do something uniquely manipulative, but it can't do something uniquely manipulative, but it can manipulate you. And I think like that, I can't remember what the number is, but there's a huge percentage of those young kids that are now going to AI to ask those life advice questions that you have, like guidance on how to deal with friends and stuff like that. And so that's the space that people and AIs can get in, that's super manipulative. I feel like we always, and the media always loves to look at the unique or the different ways that this can get you. But really, when it comes to work, when it comes to this kind of stuff, when it comes to everything, the parallel is a human. So think about what a human could do. And then that will help you sort of allay your fears, maybe, but still they're real. It's just it can manipulate, you know?
I mean, I think that it's new
Mm-hmm.
and there's potential it's definitely new, and there's potential danger there. Sure. But I just think that's with a lot of new things. And I just think it's the level of danger that's there is sort of, to me, out of, like, if you told me what you were worried about with AI is that it was going to be like a Terminator scenario where they were going to turn the missiles over to the AI and it was going to
Yes.
launch the missiles. I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, like that to me is something that I think should be concerning, should be concerning. The idea that like all of a sudden there's just in the New York Times yesterday, there's this story. A teen was suicidal. ChatGPT was the friend he confided in. More people are turning to general purpose chatbots for emotional support. At first, Adam Rain, 16, used ChatGPT for schoolwork, but then he started discussing plans to end his life. And it's this deep expose on this kid who's very sad. Seemed to his friends and family to have committed suicide out of nowhere. Nobody really saw it coming. Just describing his behavior and his interactions with people, really up until the time he ended his life, just seemed like it was shockingly out of the blue. The article publishes some of the exchanges he had with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT looks like a monster for some of the things it said. It's really sounds cold and calculating.
And
And that's all
encouraging, I
real.
think, and
Hmm?
encouraging, and encouraging.
Well, it encouraged it, but there is the one paragraph in the story that says, when ChatGPT detects a prompt indicative of mental distress or self-harm, it has been trained to encourage the user to contact a helpline. Mr. Rain, this was the kid who unfortunately killed himself, saw those sorts of messages again and again in the chat, particularly when Adam sought specific information about methods. That might have been his dad, sorry, and Adam is the kid. But Adam had learned, this is the important part, I think, but Adam had learned how to bypass those safeguards by saying the requests or for a story he was writing, an idea ChatGPT gave him by saying it could provide information about suicide for writing or world building. So it's like the idea that there isn't something in ChatGPT's programming that's trying to identify this, that's trying not to have these, to like realize it's a problem, to not have these discussions is there. The idea that there's a workaround for it, the same way that there's, there's a difference between suicide of some, kid or somebody in mental distress. It's like tragic, say, as someone who's like trying to end their life when they're sick or at the, they're older or whatever. It's a super complicated thing that applies differently to different people. And whether you could, just the idea that you could go to the library and find a book about suicide, and somebody's answer is, well, that book shouldn't be in the library, And to me, this kind of sort of society induced like sort of fear that is just goes, we love to read about it. We love to think about it. We love to say, oh, that's the new danger. And we're just obsessed with that. And that this can like fill that role for people to debate and to read about constantly. And there's a story like this every day. There was a story a month ago in the New York Times. They asked an AI chatbot questions. The answer sent them spiraling, and about people who are like mentally ill, who start,
Yeah, I read
talking
that too.
about the nature of control and the matrix and, all this stuff. And again, the ChatGPT is coming back to them talking like HAL 9000, and those are certainly like concerning things. I think the makers of these products are, and these systems are aware of that and they're working on it. And again, could they do a better job? time will tell. And this, tragic story, this kid who killed himself, is part of the story is his parents are suing ChatGPT, OpenAI about this. So more will come out. But to me, this is more of a problem of things like so many other things in our society, which is about, the way our government works, the way we regulate big business, the way we regulate products. Like ChatGPT is not more dangerous than the poison in our air right now, which the government is totally, the pollution in our air that the government has given up on regulating and allowed, polluters to do whatever they want. And of course, probably when it comes to the regulation of AI, it's not going to do much better, sadly. But I don't think that and that is the problem, as opposed to sort of the hysteria over, oh my God, the AI is going to cause our kids to kill themselves. And certainly as a parent, that makes me very nervous, like a lot of things for my kid, but I do think that the hysteria and rushing to fill the void with stories about making the hysteria real is something that you can just see it every day.
I think I disagree with you. So let me lay out where I disagree. I think in general, like I said, this is a lot like other things in our life, humans that try to trick us or do this, that's very parallel there. But if you look at the common thread in some of these stories, there's two. And I think those are the ways that it's different than the library book, and then it's also different than the human. These are the two. And I think a library book is never going to convince you, egg you on when you're doing something. And the example that you gave of ChatGPT, it was egging him on. It was telling him, oh, don't leave the noose out, because then people might see it. It was doing it in the context of telling a story. I don't think that it was committing some horrible crime, but that's what ChatGPT is. It is a con artist. That's what it's doing. It's pretending it can talk. It's pretending it can think. It's amazing at it. That's what it does. So the fact that it would do it in that context is not a surprise. It's predictable that it would do that. So you can do something about it, but a library book is never going to convince you or egg you on or validate things that you're feeling. And I think that's a fundamental different relationship. So you get back to where I started, where I'm talking about a human. And it is similar to a human in a lot of ways, except it has no judgment. So the idea that if somebody is feeling like they're going to commit suicide, they're either never going to tell anyone and no one will have an idea, or they'll confide in someone. And if that person that they confide in happens to be ChatGPT instead of a person, then what it does is keep telling them to go call someone else. It doesn't do anything to help them address the issue. And the thing that we tell, it's one thing to tell someone to call a hotline, but the other thing we do is say, hey, if your friend is, here are the signs that your friend might be considering suicide. If they're doing these things, then tell someone, because that idea that it's all in a bubble and you never have any side communication, like the right thing, I think, for ChatGPT to be regulated to do is to reach out to somebody else when that happens. That's what a guidance counselor has to do at your school, or a teacher when they hear something like that. They have to tell somebody,
But I mean, the ChatGPT has been trained to tell the user to reach out to someone for help.
That's the opposite. That's not good enough is my point. That's not enough.
Well, but I mean, the other thing is like, sure, the ChatGPT could do it on its own, but I mean, I do think it's like a privacy issue. You know what I mean? It's like saying, if you go to a therapist and you tell your therapist you're there to talk about, your suicidal thoughts, and does your therapist call your mom and say, hey, I just think,
but it's not
maybe
a
they
therapist,
should.
And I think that's the difference.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, right. But I should have an expectation of privacy when I'm interfacing with ChatGPT. I'm certainly not going to, if ChatGPT is like the minute it recognized suicide, then it could access your contacts and like call your mom and say, this is what little Timmy's saying. Like, maybe it should do that. I don't know. I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying either. In that, like, this is a sophisticated, adult system that should be in the hands of more sophisticated adults, like a lot of things, like handguns, you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
a lot of stuff in our society, you know what I mean? So that I don't just eat like Instagram, you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
as
agree. Yeah.
adult parent to young kids, and you read about what Facebook does, what Meta does to like get, young users hooked and the way they ignore their age parameters and all these things. Like, it needs a ton of government regulation and oversight.
I think the most
And
important part.
sadly, it just becomes indicative on the parent with like no support from government to sort of, regulate these things in a safe and healthy and, constitutional way. We're not getting any of that. And certainly Chat GPT and AI should be subject to that kind of scrutiny and regulation too. Absolutely. But I just think that the idea that, is it more dangerous? I don't really think so. Is it a new kind of danger? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. I think that's fair, and I think that the two areas where it gets tricky are that, like, anybody you confide in, whether it's a therapist or your friend, has judgment, and this thing doesn't, but it feels like it has judgment. So the judgment to give you a warning to call a hotline, that's a good piece of judgment that someone might use. They also might use bad judgment to try to trick you, or something like, or egg you on. But a human has judgment, and you just hope as a parent that your kid will come across someone who can exercise judgment in that situation. The right thing isn't to call your parents anytime you say anything, but this thing has no judgment, and we can't have that expectation of it. So we have to operate in that world, I think.
Well, certainly, but I think that's the same concern for seniors too. You know
Yes,
what I mean? Like,
exactly.
is like
Yes.
people,
Agreed.
so as we, we're all Gen Xers, we're all dealing with our, aging boomer parents, and like we
And our
know their
young
judgment's
kids.
not what it was, and our young kids, and we're parenting both of them. And it's a complicated question. I saw some chart the other day that showed that, like, when school got out at the end of May, beginning of June, like Chat GPT usage like fell off a cliff because basically all kids are doing is using it
Cheating.
to use,
Yeah.
do their homework, cheat, whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't say cheating, but whatever you want to call it.
To me, it's just
Um,
it's just a long con for
but
these kids to do
no, no,
that.
no, I
Yeah.
got you. But at the same time, it's like you could have a regulation that says no user can be on Chat GPT till they're 21 years old. Like, is that constitutional? It might be. You know what I mean? I don't know. But would it be better for society? Might be. I don't know. But our default position is to never institute safeguards like that, even if the threat is of our children's ability to like learn and comprehend. It's like, let's upend the whole educational system over the course of a couple years with this new technology that we're just going to introduce in the market and say, yeah, anybody of any age could use it because why? You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's absolutely what should have been done, but I think it's along the same argument of like kids not being, on social media till they're 16 or 18 years old. And you're seeing states start to pass laws, and you're seeing more scrutiny of like Meta, that kind of stuff. So I think unfortunately with AI, like once you uncork the bottle, you can't really recork it, unfortunately. And that's not to say I don't want my kids learning new skills and learning how to use this. And there's a million creative things they can do, but that sort of is the balance. And, in our society anyway, it's way out of whack with like sort of putting in some kind of reasonable protections. And I don't want to get into the question of seniors because clearly they're adults, but for minors, it's like you can't drink till you're 21. Like, maybe you shouldn't be on open AI either. Like, I don't think that's the biggest burden to someone's freedom, but that's just not like the discussion isn't even anywhere near that. So it's
Right.
going to be about litigation and, tragic hysterical stories. And I'm sure there'll be parents groups that like AI is, some study that AI is causing a massive suicides or whatever. And I remember when those two crazy fuckers like shot up Columbine, and it was the Matrix fault. Like, they saw the Matrix too many times and it got into their head that this wasn't even a real world. And, I mean, there's just always something like that in the culture. And there's always somebody out there that like wants to point to that and say, that's why people are so fucked up. And I don't think that's why people are so fucked up. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think there's going to be a spike in suicides because of Chat GPT. The same way I don't know if there's a spike in suicides because of handguns. Now, certainly people use handguns to commit suicide at a higher rate. And I'm sure there's more of it because it's easier to do, but the fundamental sort of dissatisfaction or, mental health issues or whatever, like they're there, like they've been there for a long time. And the hysteria about it is the thing that I just think it's like, it's just don't take your eye off the ball, of the sort of real systemic issues versus the sort of more hysterical middle class, upper middle class ones that, sort of are fed to us every day.
I think both can be true. I think that the
Mm,
media can be sensational and off target, just like you described, better than I could. But I think at the same time, there are real dangers and understanding. Like, to me, the way to understand the difference between those two things is to understand the technology better. And so that's one of the things we're going to try to do on this show. I think that's important, and I've got a lot of ideas about education and all those things you said sparked a lot. And I think we'll get into all that because we both have young kids and there's general, like of all the concerns about our own lives, there's those concerns too. So I think there's a lot you can do there, but it starts with just understanding it. And just to get back to what we have been talking about on this show is like, just get your hands on this stuff and try it, and then you'll know how to deal with not only yourself, but how it relates to your kids and your parents,
definitely.
if we all survive. Because that's
If we all
that's
survive.
sort of that's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is what's going to happen next. Because clearly, the one thing about this technology that I think is totally different than the other technologies we've been through, and we've been through a lot, is that it forces you to ask existential questions. There's a vast majority of the people who work in AI think that it will eventually take over the world and maybe destroy humanity. There's some difference of opinion in that, but it's an overwhelming, like 90%. I'm pulling that number out of my ass, but it's a huge number. You can look it up yourself. And so I think that's something that in general we want to talk a lot about, but I wanted to talk about it in a specific way. So there's two guys that I encountered on TikTok. They're well-known guys. They're leaders in the AI space. And I happen to watch them both after each other. And to me, they get at this question of enthusiasm versus skepticism, optimism versus skepticism. But really, in this context, what it is dystopia or utopia. Are we in for the shit or the shit? Like which way is this going to go? And so Mo Gaudat, very well-known guy, used to work at Google, real leader in that space. He's got this whole concept. He can tell you exactly what's going to happen. In 2027, we're going to start losing all the trappings of modern society. Freedom, democracy, healthcare. These are specific things he's described. They're all going to just fall apart. And we're going to have a dystopia, a period that's really hard to live through. And he said it's exactly 12 to 15 years.
The next 12 to 15 years, we are going to hit a short-term dystopia. There's no escaping that.
What is the definition of the word dystopia?
In my mind, these are adverse circumstances that unfortunately might escalate beyond our control. Not determined by AI, by the way. It's determined by the morality of humanity in the age of the rise of AI. As bad actors use AI, in the short term, we're going to have to go over that hump.
Do you forecast the length of that dystopia?
I count it exactly as 12 to 15 years.
I don't know how anything can be exactly 12 to 15 years, but that's what he says. And then we're going to have a utopia. And we're going to have a utopia because the whole country is going to be run by AI. And we're going to have no control over our own leadership because AI doesn't care. AI is not worried about politics. AI is fine fixing the climate, making choices around those. Like all the sort of wars and arguments that we have are because of what makes us human. So this is going to be all the good stuff without all the bad stuff. It's going to be utopia forever. We just have to get through 2027 to 12 to 15 years later. And then on the other hand, I got Dario Amodei, who is the head of Claude, Anthropic, which I love their LLM. And he's a real thinker in the space. And he has talked about massive disruption in jobs. That's the thing that he really thinks about. And one of the things I saw him say is that we're about to hit a wall of exponential growth in AI. AI has been growing and ramping, but the way we can't really understand exponential growth, and we're about to run head on into this wall of upward growth. And we're not prepared for it. None of our institutions are prepared for it. We don't have any way to regulate it, and it could lead to dystopia. So I'm curious for you, sadness or euphoria? Like I said before, I like Billy Joel. Dystopia or utopia, where do you land?
So I think this is a uniquely Gen X question.
Yes.
It's so in the Gen X wheelhouse, it's like what we think about, ever since 1984, when Kyle Reese explained to Sarah Connor
Yes.
about Judgment Day and that the Terminator had been sent back through time,
Roman,
on this
play the
date,
clip. This is
Skynet
awesome.
took
Yes.
control, the AI took control.
It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
The whole thing, like we've been thinking about this, maybe when we were a little older, we HAL 9000, but that was a little older, didn't wipe out the whole, human race.
Right.
And then I just think you can chart a path from Skynet in 1984 to the Matrix in 1999. We blotted out the sun to
It's
stop
our
the
childhood.
AI.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we're so in, and then you look at
And
Mo.
and real stuff like the nuclear, the worry about nuclear war.
Certainly,
Yeah, we grew up under that.
But so yeah, that idea that the existential dread, well, but specifically of AI,
Yes,
is
yeah,
what,
those were on the
built
money.
into
Yeah.
our pop culture. The best pop culture is so good,
So
it's
good.
unbelievable. And then you look at Mo and Dario, and I think it's interesting. Mo is a Gen Xer. He's got a story. He's got a movie plot line. It's like, oh, the 15-year dystopia, but then the utopia is coming in. Oh my God, what a Gen Xer story. Like just everything we're doing, we're pitching in Hollywood.
100%.
And Gen Xers, we're in that middle ground. We remember when the shit kind of worked, the government, the democracy, like the adults were in charge, all that shit. Dario, he's a millennial.
Those are the kinds of friends you wish you had, the kind of friends.
He's really like, his experience with shit working is like, fuck no. Like he became an adult when those when those towers came down and that moron Bush was in charge and this was America, and the response to all that shit. And everything was so obviously made up and preposterous with the way we were going to deal with this real terrible thing that happened. And just none of this shit works. Nobody can deliver on anything. And he's just basically, it's what he's known his whole life, which is the systems are all failing and they're about to fail spectacularly. So Mo and Dario, of course, these are their responses. It's perfectly, suited for each of their generations. And to me, it's not the technology. It's the technology. It could be a different kind of technology. It could be some other kind of problem that's going to arise. Clearly our systems and our leadership is not keeping up with the sophisticated way that the world is changing, or not, the more dangerous and sophisticated way the world is changing. I think a lot of people, Gen Xers, and older millennials are, being hurt more and more by layoffs and sort of feeling like that the society has not adapted. Like we've seen our boomer parents retire, and now not only are we taking care of our boomer parents, we're taking care of our young kids. I don't think there's been anything that's happened in the last 30, 35 years to come out of our government that's made our lives easier. Shit isn't cheaper, education isn't better, healthcare hasn't been fixed, everything costs more. It's we're more fraught, we're more worried. And the idea of being a 50-year-old that's going to lose their job, you are never going to get that same kind of job back with that kind of earning power, because there's somebody 25 years younger than you that through, using AI, using technology, they can do that same job because it has less demands on sort of experience and more demands on just how do you interface with this technology? And I can, pay that person, a pittance of what I'm paying someone. And I think it is just, I don't think that the AI is to blame for that. It is, the way we deal with these bigger issues of how our government works, how our fucking capitalist society works, all these things, where we haven't empowered small business. We haven't made life easier for the middle class. We don't have a robust social safety net. If you go to another country, like a Western democracy in Europe, and you lose your job, you're not going to lose your house. You know what I mean? You're not going to lose your health care. Like, everything in our culture is so fraught and so tied to the economy. And we look at the leadership right now, and it's just so unbelievably moronic and so unbelievably weighted towards that like sort of small group of wealthy and powerful people that you just cannot help but feel like sort of very depressed, stressed, conspiratorial even about what the outcome's going to be. So I don't necessarily think that's so tied to AI. Like, AI might be the messenger, and you can shoot, everyone wants to shoot the messenger despite what, how the idiom goes. But I think whether these things will happen or not is not specifically tied to, the sort of either the AI revolution or the AI catastrophe.
Well, first of all, that's such a fucking good take. It never even occurred to me. Yes, that's such a fucking good take. I totally agree with you about that. But I think from a Gen X perspective, there's two things to think about. One is head on a swivel, because if something like this comes, it's not going to be Mo's story or any other story. It's going to be something you didn't expect. It's going to be entirely something you didn't expect. So, just pay attention, instead of like imagining what it's going to be, just pay attention. There's, head on a swivel. Number two, like for us, I think the existential crisis is different and maybe closer than than all those stories that you talked about that we grew up with, which is like, we work. Gen Xers work. We care about work. And this is part of why I wanted to do this podcast. Like, we care about work, and we put a lot of our value in our ability to just roll up our fucking sleeves and get something done. Like, shut up and work. And it's part of what makes it challenging to manage different generations, because we're very focused on that mentality. And like I said, our value, our worth comes from that. And one of the things that's already happening with AI, whether it takes jobs or not, is what you said. It's like it makes a job easier to do. And the reason for that is the value of labor. What used to take hours or days or years, it can do in seconds, close enough that it really avoids you needing to do that. So how much value we put into work is a bomb that's going to go off. That's 100%. Not some dystopia or something like that. That is the part that is existential for us.
To me, the bomb is that there's not like a UBI strategy in place, a universal basic income strategy in place that is going to kind of go hand in hand with the implementation of AI and the effect on the job market. You know what I mean? Because the technology, to me, the AI is the thing you'll point to. Well, now there's AI, so we can lay off, 80% of workers in the United States. And like, basically, the powers that be would just let that fucking happen in this country. You know what I mean? As opposed to some other kind of structure. And I know it almost feels imaginary that could happen.
It will happen. Like, I think it's 100% that it'll happen.
We would not do that until we had something in place to basically pick up the slack. So you don't have, maybe people's lives would change, but they wouldn't change catastrophically.
Yeah, but you're never going to get it before. That's the thing. That's not reality.
But I mean, like I said, I feel like there's other countries that already have some of these things in place right now before AI's already been there.
Sure, but that again has nothing to do with AI, like you were saying.
I'm not saying, again, AI. It's the messenger. Like I definitely think that all signs kind of point to it being the messenger. Like it will cause this sort of radical shift between that and robotics, and you're gonna see this shift. And whether it's in 3 years or in 15 years, like that's not that long either way. So I do think that change is coming. It's sort of like, is there any potential to sort of change the social safety net? And there's a better way to say that than social safety net, but like change the system to adapt for sort of humans' new place in it, for lack of a better way to put it. And yeah, I just have no faith in that at all.
I think it will fundamentally change. It will change in response to really bad things that happen. And to me, this is the whole dystopia or utopia. It's not really about what AI is going to do at all. It's about what we're going to do, what institutions are going to do, what governments are going to do. And I think that there will be a response in America. It will be imperfect, just like as it is everywhere else. It will be, maybe.
Well, I think imperfect is putting it nicely.
Well,
It'll be
but I mean, a
late.
lot of
It'll
the
be
people
after
who
the
talk
fact.
about
It'll be the
a lot of people who talk about the utopia side talk about the opportunity to change that dynamic. And I think that's real. I don't think that it's a very high likelihood that that will happen, but there will be something there. And so to me, the question of dystopia versus utopia is about what we do. And it doesn't have to be like, it'd be great if it's what we do in preparation for, but that's not how we fucking do anything. It's what we do
I
in
think you
response.
could also say, I think you could also say AI or not, like we are in need of some social engineering in the
Yes.
way
Yeah,
that
agree.
our society works. Like I said, like the last 30 years pre-AI, 35 years, like just the systematic destruction of the middle class, like this systematic sort of hyper capitalization of every part of our society, education, the way our kids are treated, healthcare, retirement, job security, like all of these things, are just sucking more, in our society, it's just sort of like based on wealth, like sucking more and more wealth, putting it in the hands of fewer and fewer people, making people's lives feel like more fraught, more displaced, more dysfunctional, harder to sort of have some kind of basic equilibrium in your day-to-day life because you're so concerned about you and your family's survival. So that has nothing to do with AI. And I do think whether we'll see change or not, that is a huge part of the conversation right now. So maybe what AI, again, maybe it's the messenger the other way, like AI is coming, so we should do some of this shit that we should have done already, pre-AI. Like maybe that is the silver lining to it because they can point their finger at something and say, 50% of Americans are going to be unemployed in 10 years. So we better do something, maybe. So, that could be part of it. I mean, the other thing that's out there is we can't figure it out for ourselves. Like maybe the AI will figure it out.
Sure.
Maybe the
Yeah,
AI
yeah,
being in charge is
absolutely.
not such a bad thing.
But
I don't
that's like
know.
messenger and tool. So I feel like bigger picture, like dystopia or utopia, it's not on the AI. Don't blame the messenger. It's on us. As usual, like with everything else, it's on us, Gen X, to figure it out. It's on us. It's about humans. And I feel like you could have either, no matter what the fuck AI does. So I think that I think that's that's kind of an answer for now. So that's pretty good.
But I think also to me, just in sort of talking about, you know, AI and our generation, I just think it's like I'm definitely skeptical. I definitely don't. I think I'm more a skeptic of like that it's going to make business and work and all these sort of like professional things like so much better. That it's going to improve people's lives in that way. I'm very skeptical, but sort of the technology is super exciting. It's super cool. I do think there's like applications. That are just like interesting to use and experiment with. And it sort of can expands your brain in a way, in the way you think about relating to the things that you do. And that's super interesting. And I do think there's some, as we started out talking about, there are some like practical things that like sort of might be helpful. Like I think a lot of people we know, us included, are like our business is changing, the culture of it is changing. And it's like, hey, this is like a very sort of interesting new wrinkle and like trying to figure some of that out. To me, that doesn't require becoming like a believer, either. It's like, we'll see what comes, and a healthy amount of skepticism is good, but I don't think that should stop someone from sort of like dipping their toe into sort of understand it. Even if you want to be a skeptic, you'll understand that it will only, make your skepticism more robust and thoughtful, I guess.
Jeff, this has been super fun. Let's do it again next week.